Aloha no kako. This is Kenson again, coming to you from the beautiful but fire-scorched island of Maui in the middle of the Pacific. Well, you can see here that I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on the Maui fires. At first, I didn't think of making a video about it because there are so many already, and I'm not sure if anyone would be interested in what I thought about it. But then, as I watched the videos and I watched the controversy of, how did the fire start and who's to blame and all of that was going on, I thought, I'm going to address it because there are, to me, I believe there are prophetic implications of this Maui fires. And so that's why I'm going to touch the subject. But I wanted to do it in a different way than the way others have done it because I want to start by speaking about the significance of this town of Lahaina, and especially to the Hawaiian people, the Kanaka Maoli, and the significance of it because it's part of history, and which is what makes this fire more tragic. It's tragic enough with the loss of so many lives, but it's more tragic because of the loss of this town, whose historical history goes back a couple centuries at least and more, if you count the Hawaiian presence there. But this is gonna be a long thing, so I'm gonna have two parts. And in the first part, I'll address this historical importance of Lahaina so that everybody who listens to this video can appreciate the context, historical context of this town. And then I'm gonna address the political chaos that's kind of resulted from this and the controversies of that. Okay, and then I'm going to address the causes or how the fire started. That's another controversy. Okay? So we're going to do that in this first part. And in the second part, I'm going to address something that's really controversial. And so I decided I'm going to do it separately. But that's going to lead us into the prophetic importance of these fires. And that's the most important part. So we're going to start from the beginning and we're going to end when we get to the end, okay? But so let's start by talking about Lahaina. This word Lahaina is a compound word. This word La means, actually has two meanings in Hawaiian. One is the day, could be day, and the other meaning is sun. And the word Haina means cruel or merciless. So Lahaina is called the town is called Merciless Sun, And if you've ever been to Lahaina in the summertime, you understand the relevance of this name. But that's not the original name of Lahaina. It was called Lele, Lele. That has nothing to do with the sun and merciless, because Lahaina was a different place even 200 years ago. And it becomes the capital of the kingdom of Hawaii, at least until 1848, when it moves to Honolulu, because Honolulu has a better harbor. Of course, it has Pearl Harbor as well, but Honolulu, meaning the meeting place, becomes a center of the islands, and eventually, of course, the capital of the state of Hawaii. But back in 200 years ago, Kamehameha, in fact, let me switch to another map. Kamehameha was a chief on the island of Hawaii. The state is called Hawaii only because Kamehameha conquered all these islands. There was a song we would learn as a kid in elementary school. King Kamehameha, the conqueror of the islands. And that's how we got to know Kamehameha and his relevance and importance. But he was a chief, one of the many chiefs on the big island, we call it, because it's the biggest. And he became the conqueror of his island, first of all. And after he conquered the big island of Hawaii, he set his sights on greater prizes, which is the rest of the islands. And so he gathered an army and an armada, and then he launched out, and then he landed here on the north coast of Maui, And let me zoom in over here. He landed on the sandy beaches of Wailuku. Wailuku is the political center of Maui, the county of Maui, and Kahului is kind of like the merchant or the economic center. I shouldn't say economic center because much of the finances of Maui are raised on the western side where we have the resorts and the tourists visit there, as well as the south, where we have Kihei, Wailea, and Makena. This is where the tourists like to go because there are the beaches and the gorgeous sunsets. But the local people tend to go shopping around here. This is where they center and do their government businesses and visit hospitals, etc., all in this area. But Kamehameha lands here with his armada, and he is met by the army of the king of Maui. His name is Kahikili. He's not here for this battle. He's off in Oahu, the island where Honolulu is, making an alliance with that king to fight Kamehameha. While in his absence, his army tries to do a rearguard action because they take his Kahikili's daughter. Her name is Keopuolani, and they usher her up this valley. This is Iao Valley. And if you've ever visited Maui, you probably drove up here to see the Iao Needle, which is up in the inside part of the valley. And so the army, Maui's army, is playing a rearguard action. Kamehameha's army is just murdering them along the way. And so this is all sandy area, and there are a lot of graves along this area because a lot of people were buried here. But the bodies were piling up in this very narrow valley, and the bodies were blocking the Iao stream that comes down the valley. It was blocked so much that the water began to dam up behind the piles of the bodies. And so if you ever come up this valley, you're going to see a park, and the park is named Kepaniwai, Kepaniwai. And there, that word is made up of three words. The word ke is the definite article, the, and pani means to block or to dam up, and vai is the Hawaiian word for fresh water, like a freshwater stream. So Kepaniwai means the blockage of the freshwater stream right here. And so the park is a beautiful park, but it's a kind of a morbid name to it, the Kepaniwai. But it recounts what happened here back then, over 200 years ago, when there was a great battle. So they usher the young princess Keopuolani over the 6,000-foot West Maui Mountains, and they come down the valley on this side, and they come to the village of Lele, which is what Lahaina was known as, and there is a canoe waiting for her, and she jumps in the canoe, and they take off. And to save her, they take her to the island of Oahu where her father is. And there, Kamehameha, well, let me finish this story. Kamehameha finally conquers this entire island, and what his next plan is to conquer Oahu. And so he gathers his army and gathers more men. I'm sure he recruits the men of Maui to fight in his army, and he began to cut down trees up in the mountains, and they start building canoes, and they assemble all the canoes here on the shore of Lahaina or the village of Lele, and they said it extended for 3 miles, 800 canoes, all ready to invade, and it took them years to do that. And while they were doing that, King Kamehameha decided to do some urban planning because the village of Lele was a beautiful village. It was fed by streams like the Kanaha stream, the Kahoma stream, which came down here, and I believe there were other underwater or underground springs that fed this area. So this area was very green, and it was almost marshy because the water just accumulated, kind of like maybe sort of like New Orleans at the mouth of the Mississippi. Maybe not that bad, of course, but Lahaina was a beautiful green area. In fact, if you zoom in and you go to where the banyan tree is, you see a street right here. and the street's name is Canal Street, which seems an odd name to find in Maui, especially, but it's because this place is so dry. But back then, what Kamehameha the Great did was he dug out these canals so that the water had a place to channel, and then he even right here in this park he built a pond, and in the middle of the pond was an island, Moku'ula, which became the residence of one of his sons who became Kamehameha the Third, and that's where his son lived, and that's where he ruled the Hawaiian kingdom, because Lahaina becomes Kamehameha's capital for his kingdom once he conquered all the islands. And if I zoom out, you can see why. Even though Kamehameha was from the Big Island, if he had made his capital, let's suppose here in Kona, it's really far from Kauai. If something happens here, he has a long ways to go to get there. So Lahaina was a good central area that had water, and had food, and he could get to the western side or his own island if to quelch any rebellion or anything like that might pop up. So Lahaina was an ideal place, and so it becomes the capital of the Hawaiian kingdom. And in fact, what happens after this is Kamehameha, just like on D-Day, in D-Day the Allies assembled on the island of the United Kingdom or of Great Britain, and then they finally launched an invasion in northern France. Of course, everybody knows about Normandy. Well, Kamehameha launches his attack on Oahu, and he pushes the Oahu army over the Pali. And if you've ever visited Oahu, you've probably visited the Pali where the strong winds blow up the cliff. And it's a beautiful sight up on the Pali. And I actually grew up in Kaneohe, which is what you see when you look down from the Pali. And it's a beautiful place where I could see the ko'olaus every day. And it's a beautiful place to live, but plenty mosquitoes over there. But anyway, get back to the story. The reason Kamehameha was so dominant as an army is that when he was in Lahaina, in fact, even when he was still in the Big Island, he traded with the sailors and the ships and the British people, the Navy that would come and visit, like Captain Cook, remember Captain Cook? And he equipped his soldiers or his warriors with Western weapons, like rifles, ammo, handguns in a way, and cannons. And if you look at the painting painted by Herb Kane, one of the great Hawaiian painters, he painted a scene of Kamehameha and his army pushing the armies of the king of Oahu over the Pali. You can look closely and you will see that a lot of his warriors were carrying rifles, because Kamehameha was not a dummy. He was an astute general, and he equipped his army with the latest weapons that he got from the foreigners, the Western people, the whalers and the navies of Britain. And so he was very forward-looking. He wasn't afraid to adapt and even adopt some Western customs and things that the West brought, so that he could, enhance his own power and his own army, and in fact his own people. He was an incredible man. But the interesting thing about Kamehameha, and you can see it. I told you, you can see it when you zoom in here. Forget if I already told you this, but if you go to Waianae Street, let me see. Let's go back to the park. Okay, here's the thing. Here's the park. And if you go to here where there is a cemetery, buried here is that young woman that they ushered up Yao Valley to usher to her escape from Lahaina. Keopuolani eventually marries Kamehameha. And Keopuolani is a very high-ranking ali'i. The ali'i are the royal people, so high-ranking that Kamehameha himself has to crawl on his knees and his hands when he approaches her. Well, they have children, and one of the children is a daughter named Princess Nahiena, and she's a gifted young woman, but unfortunately dies young. And Queen Keopuolani marries Kamehameha, and when she dies, she's buried over here in Waiola Cemetery. Uh, Keopuolani is from Wailuku, that I showed you before, and Princess Nahiena is buried here. I believe King Kaikili, her father, is also buried here, but I might be wrong about that. But here you have royalty, high royalty, because Keopuolani was considered even divine. Okay, and so this is a very historic town. They have these things like that, and Waiola Church, Waiola water. I mentioned that before, and Ola means life, so living water. That's what the church was named. It's the oldest church on Maui, that was built in the 1830s, and it's almost 200 years old. But you can see by this picture, it has been completely burned to the ground. They lost a lot of historical artifacts and significance there. And the other thing that was burned, of course, was the prison was burned, and this is another historic building. Uh, this building here is the courthouse. I'm not sure if I mentioned it, but when King Kamehameha III was ruling the Hawaiian Kingdom from the pond, Moku'ula Island, his palace was here. That became the courthouse. So this is an old building right here, and that is completely destroyed as well. And also destroyed was the home of the first missionary, the Reverend Dwight Baldwin, and he was able to build this house. The Hawaiians donated this land to him, and he built this property. It's really like an estate, and in there he practices medical skills. And he had a clinic. His wife ran a school over here. This is a 200-year-old home right here, and that is completely destroyed. I've been here hundreds of times testing the water regularly here. Um, it's really sad what happened to Lahaina because of the historical buildings and artifacts that were housed in these museums, like the Baldwin House, the court house right here had artifacts, the prison had artifacts, and Waiola Church had artifacts. They lost a lot of history, basically, is what I'm trying to say, when they lost this town. In fact, you've been looking at this map, and I forgot to tell you that this map shows the burnt homes and structures of Lahaina. In fact, just to again give you a picture of what Lahaina was like, this park, and I've come here many times testing the water. It's called Malu'ulu Olele Park. Okay? Malu means the shelter or shade. Ulu is the breadfruit tree. So the shade of the breadfruit tree of Lele, again, the ancient name for this village of Lahaina. And so, it shows you what Lahaina looked like before. It was just covered with these tall, broad, large leaf breadfruit trees because of all of the water and the canals and the rivers that were running through here. So it didn't look like it looks today. You see this barren stretch that used to have sugarcane and dry. And again, the word Lahaina means a harsh sun or cruel and merciless sun, because Lahaina is really hot today. But before it was called Lele, in fact, Malu'ulu Lele, just a shaded, rich green area. So the entire environment of Lahaina has changed in 200 years. Now let me bring us to the present day and show you something about this fire. Okay, I want to show you something as we zoom in. In fact, let me show you the arteries that run through the town of Lahaina. The original road is this road right here. It's Front Street. You hear that a lot on the videos if you watch the videos about the fire. Front Street runs right along the ocean shore. Okay, and it is equivalent to, in the New Orleans, the French Quarter. Where they have those old buildings. That's what, to me, what Front Street kind of reminded me of when we were at the French Quarters. But it's where they have the Halloween thing, where people dress up and kind of like Mardi Gras in New Orleans. But that's the oldest street that runs through Lahaina. The second one is this highway, the Honoapiilani Highway. Honoapiilani, named after a king in Maui, Piilani. But this highway is the main artery until they built this road right here about 10 years ago, the bypass, because this highway has several stoplights and everything gets jammed up. The most jammed up road is Front Street. The second is HP Lani. And so they built this bypass that goes around everything, and you come down by the cannery and join up with the HP Lani Highway to travel farther north. Now, when the fire occurred, and you can see it from this Google Maps thing. You can see that everything above the bypass, the Lahaina bypass, was untouched by the fire. You can see it here. And the houses are still there. Princess Nahi'ena that I mentioned before, the daughter of Queen Keopuolani, she has a school right here named after her. And the Lahaina Intermediate, as well as the high school, were untouched. Everything above the bypass. Since we're here, I wanted to just bring up the subject of the water, because way up here above the high school is our Lahaina water treatment facility. And so to get there, I've been here hundreds of times. Drive through the school, take this dirt road that hugs the cliff down into Kanaha Valley. And down here is a stream, the Kanaha stream. And here the water department has two wells, well number 1 and well number 2. And so these two wells combine with surface water, which we take from the stream way upstream, and we bring that water down through a pipe, and we combine them, and then we pump them up this cliff. That's probably about 150 feet, not very tall, but it takes a lot of energy to pump it up here. And here it enters into the Lahaina water treatment facilities, and it first goes into this said facility, said basement sedimentary, where there are ponds in here, and they allow the sediments to settle out, and they skim off the cleaner water on the top, and then they send it down to the filtration building right here. And here we have microfiltration units, kind of like super reverse osmosis filters. It takes a lot of energy to push it through the membranes, and what comes out is a very clean, potable, drinkable water, because it takes out all the particulates down to probably about 2.2 microns. And then they send it up to the tank. You would call this the reservoir in a way, 3 million gallons. It becomes the place where we treat the water with chlorine, and then we gravity feed it down to the people of Lahaina. And I noticed since the days that I worked, I retired 10 years ago, but they've put a lot of solar panels on all of these buildings. I used to help with the sanitation survey, and I would walk on the top of these tanks and examine everything to make sure they're safe. But the water will gravity feed down into Lahaina, and there's one other stop. It's this tank, a pressure breaker tank, that keeps it from, destroying all of the pipes in people's homes, regulates the pressure, and then it continues down to the bottom. But I wanted to show you the this facility, because when we get to the causes part, to know this facility is important. Now we go below the bypass, and you're going to see that you can actually tell where the fire started, because you can see the demarcation between the homes that have not been burnt versus the homes that were burnt. Now again, think that you're going from a higher elevation in the upper right to a lower elevation, and the wind comes from this side down. And the wind that day of this fire was burning, or was blowing really fast. Let me go to this initial picture again. On the day before the fire broke out on August 8th, on the night before actually, the fire broke out up here in Olinda, up in the upcountry area of Maui. I live in the upcountry area, and I remember when I went to bed, I could smell smoke, and I thought my house was on fire. So I got out of bed and I went out at night outside to see if my house was on fire. And it wasn't, of course, no homes I could see fire. But there was a big party going on. One of my neighbors, loud talking and laughter. And I thought, oh, they must have started a barbecue. That must be it. Went back to bed. Next morning, I find out that there was a fire up here, way up in Olinda. And I can actually see that from my house. And so the next morning, I went outside. And sure enough, I could see smoke coming out from this area, blowing down. And no wonder I could smell smoke. There was another fire that was started, and this was in the Upper Kula area. And this fire was very damaging. It burned down 9 homes, in fact, including one restaurant, the Sandalwood. But if by itself, these two would have been a big news item because of the damage that this second fire caused. In fact, these fires are still burning, even many weeks later, coming up to 4 weeks later. The big damaging fire that started that Monday night was this one right here. It started in Lahaina, and but the interesting thing was the following morning at 9 o'clock, I got an emergency message on my cell phone that told me that this fire was 100% contained. So let's take it off this map. So this is my concept of what was happening on that Tuesday at 9 o'clock in the morning. I could climb my roof. I went up on my roof of the house, and I could see this smoke from both of these fires. In fact, that night I could see the orange glow in the sky from this fire on the southern side as I stood on the roof of my house. But then at 3 o'clock that afternoon, my wife gets this text from one of her friends, and she said, "Hey, did you hear about the fire in Lahaina?" And she goes, "No." And she said, it's burned hundreds of homes. And she turns to me and she tells me what she's read on the text. And I told him, cannot be, because I saw on my phone this morning that the fires were put out. But she said, yeah, but my friend said hundreds of homes have been burned. So let's put this back. This fire somehow is reignited, and now it's causing great damage, not just materially to the structures, but I'm thinking in human lives. I remember hearing the first report from our mayor, and they asked him how many people have died, and he said, we have 6 confirmed deaths. And I turned to my wife and I said, there's no way only 6 people died. There are at least 100 people died in that fire, because I told her the school children are home from school, the kupuna, the grandfathers and grandmothers are there at home as well, and they cannot get away from that fire. If you tell me hundreds of homes have been destroyed, I know there are at least 100 people have died in that fire. So that's how this thing started for me, and the way I looked at this fire. Now this fire starts up here. Let's get back to our map, and the wind, which is howling. And I remember on that Monday night when I took my dogs out, in fact, earlier that evening, the wind was blowing like crazy. The gusts, I would guess, was 50, 60 miles per hour. And if you live like in Lahaina on the downslope, it's going to be shooting into near hurricane force winds, 75, 80 miles an hour. So the wind comes from here, this direction. So the fire starts here and it moves downhill, heading towards the ocean, and which is why these homes have not been burned. And interestingly, even these homes and these homes from this point downwards are all gone. It's almost as if this was a planned destruction of the town of Lahaina. I mean, when you look at the map, they're all destroyed. And the border on this side is a canal that collects the Kahoma and the Kanaa stream water, and it sends it down this wide canal. It kind of looks like the Los Angeles River, that canal that John Connor took his dirt bike down trying to escape from the T1000 Terminator guy. Well, this canal kind of looks like that. It's just a large, wide cement structure, and this thing seems to have become a fire break. That was my initial view, because everything on this side, the industrial side of Lahaina town, was untouched except for this condo area right here. And there's even a couple of videos of women that were in their condos, and they take videos of the initial fire that's happening on this side of the canal, and they don't know whether to get out or not. And it's a good thing they did, because their canal eventually burned. But when the fire was up here, the fire department, their only chance to stop this fire was to have already been up here, and maybe not necessarily at these streets, but somewhere up here, maybe at the bypass with their trucks, ready for any fire that started. Because once this fire starts and you have 80 miles an hour wind blowing down, once it starts consuming homes and jumps to the next home and the next and the next, the fight is over. That battle is over. You're not going to stop it, because you know how many trucks and firemen it takes just to put one fire out with no wind. It takes a large effort to do that. But when you have this wind and the fire is just jumping from home to home, the mission has to change. Forget the fire, get the people out. See, and we're going to get to it later, but that's where some other warnings should have come into play. But all these people are at home, maybe taking a nap, maybe preparing dinner, maybe the kids are waiting for their parents to come home, watching television, etc. And they don't know it. But this disaster, looming disaster, deadly disaster, is like a monster, is rushing down this slope, ready to consume and eat anything in its path, living or not living. And this is where I would go if I were the fire inspector, to find out what started this thing right here. Okay? We're going to talk about that later. But you can see that the fire goes all the way down to Honoapi'ilani Highway, jumps the highway, and it reaches the shore. And I think I'm not sure if I told you about the roads. Okay, let me go over it again. I've done this taping so many times, and then I make a mistake and I do it again, or my wife is in the kitchen and banging around, and so I have to redo it again. But let me just go over the arteries that run through Lahaina again. The initial one is Front Street that runs along the shore. This is the oldest road right here, and if you've been here, you can attest how narrow it is, and you drive really slow when you go on Front Street. The second one is Honoapi'ilani Highway, okay, this one right here, and this is a better road. People go a little bit faster, but there's still traffic lights, and worse, there are a lot of power poles, utility poles here that are blown down in the wind. And the third one that was built just about 10 years ago is the bypass right here. And this is the best road. If you're going to escape the fire, you want to get out through this way. Now, unfortunately, as you've maybe seen on the videos, people trying to escape, this road was blocked off. People that were coming from the north side had the idea, I'm going to jump on the bypass to get away from the fire. The police had set up a roadblock so they couldn't get up here to run away. Even someone who was down here tried to get on the bypass here. They couldn't get on it. It was blocked. The police had completely blocked off this road from anybody traveling on it. And the reason they gave was there was brush fires along the road. But these would be kind of small. This is like low, grass, dry grass, maybe a foot or two high. If you're driving in a car, it wouldn't affect you at all. This road right here was blocked off as well, the HP Lanai Highway, because of the electric lines that they said were blocking the road and the posts. The only way of escape they allowed people to take was Front Street. And incredibly, they were channeling everybody down to Front Street. They were blocking off access to the HP Lanai as well as the bypass. But inexplainable. They blocked off Front Street. You couldn't get out on the north side, and you couldn't get out here on the south side. This is where Front Street comes up to the highway. They had police officers keeping people back. So the people were basically in this trap. It was like a death zone, kill zone in a way, that so many people got stuck in their cars and they died in their cars unless they parked their cars and they jumped in the ocean. And they say that maybe up to 300 people, eyewitnesses said, were in the ocean to try to escape from the fire, hugging the seawall because the wind was so strong as well. So anyway, that's the situation of the fire and of the history of Lahaina. So let's move on to the third thing that I'm going to talk about, and that is the political response, the response of our leaders, right here. Now here is all of them standing up, kind of looking like a, one of those lineups that you would see, and some other people would say, yeah, that is a lineup. These are the guys that kind of failed us in this emergency. It's almost as if the guy in Casablanca, Claude Rains' character, says, round up the usual suspects, and here they are standing here. You might recognize, of course, our administrator for emergency agency, Herman Ondaya, right here. I'm not going to go into his story. You might have read about it or heard about that. Here's our governor, Josh Green, speaking to the press. Our mayor, Richard Bisson. I couldn't get the sign language woman's name, but she did an omen's job. Incredible job she did. Our police chief, Peltier, and our fire chief, Ventura. And here in the back, you see the symbols of the powers that be, in a way. You have the federal government represented by the U.S. flag. Maybe these people represent FEMA, representing the federal government. You have the state flag representing Josh Green and the state power. And then the seal of the county of Maui, represented by our mayor standing here. In fact, for 20 years, I wore this seal on my shirt as I worked out of the water lab. Proud of it as well. Proud to be a county worker and enjoyed every day of work and serving the people of my island. But this flag right here, you might recognize, has a Union Jack on it. And it's because this flag was adopted by King Kamehameha the Great that I was talking about. He had a relationship with the British nation. He's from the island where Captain Cook first landed, Kealakekua Bay in the Kona side. And in fact, his island is the ones that killed Captain Cook. But they learned a lot from the British, as well as I told you about King Kamehameha, that he was a man who was astute and he gained a lot from the British Navy. He got weapons from them, and he was no dummy. He knew that the West had advanced items, weaponry, and other things, and he was a Hawaiian that was forward-looking. And so he made an alliance with England. In fact, Hawaii was not a colony of England. We were a part of England. And that's why King Kamehameha put the Union Jack on the Hawaiian flag. And this flag goes back to the Hawaiian Kingdom, which was once a part of England and then became an independent republic, the Kingdom of Hawaii, and then was annexed by the American nation. We're going to talk about that shortly now. But these are our leaders, and I would say that there was a failure, an incredible failure of leadership when it came to this disaster. And the foremost one, as I was mentioning in this map, of all these people that were living here in their residences. And by the way, these are all homes. These are not tourist structures. These are homes of local people, many of whom worked for the Pioneer Mill when the mill was still running. And even down here in this area, you have homes here and homes over here. In fact, one of my co-workers in the lab, her home is over here too. and her house got burned down. And so this area is not so much tourist people or people on vacation, but these are residences. And the siren would have been really a good thing to sound at this time, because as soon as this fire started, the firemen are trained and they know the impact of high winds on fire and how it can just blow and make that fire move from house to house to house. And I'm not sure if any of them ever called the emergency office in Wailuku and said, "You guys better blow this siren because we got to get the people out." That would have been my first thought. Forget the homes. We cannot save the homes. Too late already. We got to get the people out. Sound the sirens already. And I know the excuse was these people on the hillside couldn't hear the sirens. No way. They can hear the sirens. I assure you, they can hear it all the way up to the treatment plant when it goes off. Because maybe the sirens are down here, but this is a sloping area, and that sound will move right up this incline. So they should have blown the siren. Not everybody has a cell phone. Not everybody will get that MIMO alert. The cell phone towers were blown down. The electric towers were blown down. So these guys here, again, like I said, they might have been at home, preparing dinner, taking a nap, watching TV, totally oblivious that this monster of a fire was barreling down on them. And the siren may have helped many of them to get out of the way. Even if it caused them to run outside, they see that fire, they run down the street, cross the street, run into this dirt area. This area was not touched. It's all empty. And so even if they had to just run into this area, it would have saved their lives. But they didn't have the warning. By the time they knew this place was on fire, their house was on fire. It was too late. And they're trapped. And they're caught inside. So they have found children hugging their dogs and hugging their family, or the kupuna hugging their family, and they're too late. They couldn't get away. The fire was moving so fast. So yeah, there was a failure of leadership of a massive amount. We're not going to get into each person that maybe had made mistakes. You can watch the videos and make up your own mind. But I wanted to just show you this phrase right here. This is called Murphy's Law. You might be familiar with it. And it states that anything that can go wrong will go wrong, and at the worst possible moment. Has that ever happened to you? It sounds like this guy Murphy is my relative, because this happens in my life a lot. Things go wrong, and I get into accidents or things like that. But this fire is an illustration of this, that things went wrong, and it was at the worst possible moment. Some of these guys weren't even on the island. There was no leadership there, and it was bad. Okay. Now, what's another trust issue is this. The Hawaiians, I'm not talking about just the local people. Local people can be Japanese, Korean, Filipino, Puerto Rican, Portuguese, Haole, can be local people, even though when most people see Haole in Hawaii, Haoles are the white people. A lot of people think the white people are all, newcomers. But a lot of white people were born here. In fact, they can trace, parents, grandparents, great-grandparents who've lived in Hawaii. So a lot of Haoles are local people. Now, I'm not talking about them right here. I'm talking about the Kanaka Maoli, the indigenous Hawaiian people. These people right here, the indigenous Hawaiians. These people have suffered great loss. They not only lost their homes, maybe in the fire, but they lost their ancestral lands and their nation, their kingdom. They lost everything in the overthrow of 1893, when the Committee of Safety, made up primarily of white landowners, industry owners like sugarcane, decided to overthrow the Queen Liliuokalani, and they took over the government. They made her sign a new constitution that reduced her powers. And for the next 5 years, they tried to join America, but were unsuccessful. So they became just the Republic of Hawaii, led by this Committee of Safety. And shamefully, some of them were missionaries or missionary children. They should have known better than doing that. But this group right here represents the Kanaka Maoli, the indigenous people that lost so much, and from over a century ago. And here they appeared. This group, the name is cut off, but they're called the Na Ohana Olele. The word Na, Ohana means the families. It's the plural. The word na it's a definite article in the plural form. Nauhana is the families of Lele. They're using the ancient name that I told you about that Lahaina was called, 200 years ago. And so these are the Kanaka Maoli, the Hawaiians. And they had a video that they put out, and I wanted to play briefly what they were doing. They were singing this song that I cannot speak Hawaiian. So I don't know what the song was saying, but every time I hear it, and even now, my heart breaks. But I wanted to just play a little bit of it for you, just so that you can hear it and see what they were singing. Okay, I wanted to play that so that you can get the sense of what they're going through, and the heartbreak, not only of losing their land and their kingdom, but now what they're thinking is that this is going to be another land grab, that the government is going to take their land, because a lot of them, they own the land, but maybe they didn't have insurance on the home, and now they cannot rebuild, so they're going to be forced to sell the land. And so this group right here, they came and they wanted to speak to the press to express their heartache and their concern of what's going to happen, that Governor Green is going to use the government's power and money to buy up their land. They already lost their land in the overthrow, and then in 1898, America was involved in the Spanish-American War. Initially, they weren't interested in annexing the Hawaiian Islands, but then they looked at Pearl Harbor and they said, wow, that would make a great Navy base. And so they annexed Hawaii. And, basically, and the people in Washington, D.C. say, at first I said, I never like your land, but yeah, now I like your land. I can take your land from you guys. Okay. And that's basically what they heard from Washington, D.C., and they lost their islands. And the Hawaiian people have been hurting ever since. I'm not Hawaiian myself, but I can feel the pain of what they're singing about. And so I wanted to share this with you because this is one of the issues that are here. But I wanted to go share with you another thing that has become a kind of like a barrier between our leaders and the people that lost on that day. And it has to do with the deaths discrepancy. The official deceased count as it stands today is 115. But this article that appeared in the Daily Mail, which is a British actually news service, says that Maui wildfires death toll climbs to 480 locals, or 480, they should have put a comma there, locals claim. And we've heard this number as well. Here, I mean, just as residents of Maui, we've heard it from friends who know the director of the morgue, because the morgue is telling us, hey, not forget this number right here. There are like hundreds of bodies charred, and a lot of them, are like small. So the director said he knows these are children and infants. They're in his morgue, and so this number is bogus in a way. That there are more than this. And in fact, I was watching a video of Jack Hibbs. Let me go back to our map, or not our map, but let me go back to this our title page. Jack Hibbs, in one of his sermons, and Jack Hibbs, by the way, kind of famous pastor. You see him on the internet a lot, but in one of his sermons, he claimed and he made the statement that over 180 corpses washed up on Lanai, which is this island right here. Now, if you look at the proximity of Lahaina to Lanai, and the winds were coming in this direction, from the high pressure system north of Hawaii, going to the low pressure system, which was Hurricane Dora south of us. The winds were not from the hurricane. It was simply that the winds generally move from high pressure to low pressure areas. So it was coming at a fast clip, and it went this direction. So if you jumped in the ocean in Lahaina and you weren't able to swim and you drowned, your body would have been floating, and the winds would have pushed you right here to Lanai, the shores of Lanai. I spent a summer here picking pineapple. This island, they used to have all pineapple, and I tried to climb over this mountain. Lanai City was here. I wanted to climb over this mountain so I could see Maui from Lanai, and I found out there's another mountain that blocked my view. But I can tell you that back then there was no roads that could get around here. So somebody got back here in his four-wheel drive perhaps and found these bodies. I've written to Pastor Hibbs to find out how he got his number. So if I find out this is false, I'll put a disclaimer on that. But anyway, let's get back to this. There is a discrepancy between what we're hearing on the ground here on Maui and what the government is telling us, and that goes back to the trust issue. Can you trust what they're telling us? Hard to trust anymore. Then we see this. This is at the police station in Wailuku. They're bringing in these refrigerated storage containers to put the bodies in. The morgue itself can hold, I'm told, 100 bodies. So why you got to bring so many of these refrigerated containers? And you can see there's room to bring some more, right? So this supports this number more than this number. So that goes back again to the trust issue. And so that's another problem with what's going on here in Maui. Well, I could go on and on about that, but I'm going to move on because I don't want this video hopefully to be banned. But let's move on to the causes. What could have caused the fire? I showed you already that the fire started below the bypass and then moved towards the ocean, down the slope. Well, the main culprit right now seems to be HECO, which is Hawaiian Electric Company. On Maui, we call them Maui Electric Company, but the down power lines. And that seems logical. You see it right here. This is up the slope. This is in Lahaina. You see the bypass running up here. Okay, these are the homes that were destroyed. Further up, again, you have the homes that weren't destroyed, but you can see there is a significant slope where the wind comes whipping down. And this picture shows one of the power lines with the transformer unit, and it's burnt out right from the fires. And so right now there are many suits being lodged against HECO. If they all succeed, HECO is going to go bankrupt, just like the California power company, PG&E, power, gas and electric, I guess, PG&E. They went bankrupt up there. HECO is going to go bankrupt here because the damage is far beyond the worth of their company. And what Hiko's response is that we turned the electricity off after the morning fire. Remember, I told you about that morning fire that occurred, and then by 9 a.m., that fire was over. But then in the afternoon, we get these alerts the fire is back on, burning hundreds of homes. Hiko is saying that fire, the afternoon one, was not caused by their electric lines because they had turned them off already. And to back their claims, people said they weren't, the survivors said the power was out. The people on Front Street, the stores, said the power was out. The schools said the powers were out, which is why they sent the kids home in the morning. So the circumstances seem to back up Hiko's claim that by the afternoon, there was no power running through their lines, so they couldn't have caused the afternoon fire. Okay? So that's the way that the situation stands right now. You know, I'm going to be on serving jury duty later this month. I'm praying that I can get on one of these trials, because I enjoy learning about what's the story behind what you see in the news, and so being on the jury might be a really amazing thing to do. So pray for me that I can be on one of those juries. Well, a second cause of the fire may have been by an accident. Could be. We do a lot of barbecuing here in Hawaii. Maybe somebody overloaded their electric circuits in the home, or maybe some of the kids that were at home were playing around. I don't know. That's why the fire inspectors need to get up to that area where I showed you the fire started. And then here's a third thing that I can think of. Maybe it was started by somebody intentionally, an arsonist. And again, the fire inspectors are able to determine accelerants and how these fires start, whether they're natural or man-made. And so they could answer this question. Well, my time is long. I'm going to stop this part of this video before we get to the final part, where I'm going to talk about a more controversial thing. It's going to be part 2 of Maui fires, down the rabbit hole. Because in this part, we're going to talk about things that are the conspiracists are discussing. And I'm open to anything, because I want the truth. Just like Tom Cruise told Colonel Jessup, Jack Nicholson, I want the truth. That's what I want. In fact, my middle name in Japanese means the teller of the truth. And it seemed like my destiny was to preach the gospel, which is what I did when I came to Christ in my senior year at the university. I joined up right away to become a missionary, and I've been trying to tell the truth since. And when it comes to the Maui fires, I want the truth, just like that Tom Cruise character. So we're going to go down the rabbit hole in the second part and find out what caused this fire. I'll tell you what I'm leaning towards. And I'm about 90% sure that this will probably be the cause. It fits in with prophecy. It fits in what God told me about 2 years ago when I was sitting in traffic in Kahului. He gave me a word. And this event fulfills that word. I'm going to share with you that in part 2. So if you're interested, I'll meet you there. Until then, aloha no. God loves you. Mahalo maponi. You take care. Take care. And you trust God. Amen.